Twilight Time is the epitome of a Cutie Mark Crusader episode. It deals with a topic that is so simplistic and so childlike that I find myself unable to really present any sort of compelling commentary or in-depth critique. This really shouldn't come as much of a surprise though, as the CMC are well-realized child characters, and as such are given juvenile conflicts to deal with. Most of the time. However, this isn't to say that Twilight Time is bad. In fact, I really like this episode a lot. The CMC have slowly but steadily moved from characters I initially had little interest in and felt were a distraction from exploring the main six, to some of my favorite characters in the entire show, and the CMC episodes becoming a treat as opposed to an interruption. And here is no exception, with Scootaloo, Applebloom, and primarily Sweetie Belle taking the reign for 22 minutes and treating us to a fun little episode. I love how after 2 full seasons, Pipsqueak is finally back and is all over this episode. It's funny how it only took meeting another princess to bring him back out of the woodwork. I wonder who his favorite princess ever is now. The Crusaders themselves were as adorable here as ever. I liked how all of them kind of adopted the characteristics of their sister figures in this outing. Scoots wanting to make sure she looked cool in all the photos being taken of her, Applebloom being the voice of reason and most level-headed of the group, and Sweetie obsessing over the spotlight and basking in being pampered. Sweetie Belle was arguably the star of this episode though, and I found her performance to be enjoyable. Her constant, "Relax, I got this," lines as she continued to dig the hole the trio was in deeper and deeper was pretty funny. One could make the argument that Sweetie got a bit of a smack with the stupid stick, especially at the end when she ropes the other Crusaders into presenting their skills to every pony despite just admitting that they weren't prepared. But Sweetie has been characterized as a bit of an airhead in the past, not to mention she was addicted to the attention during this episode, so she could have easily just refused to see the writing on the wall. Similarly appreciated for me was how the Crusaders are finally changing up the way they're attempting to earn their cutie marks. Instead of constantly trying a bunch of stuff as quickly as possible, here they're shown to instead be taking some time to invest in one skill at length. And I like how it's Princess Twilight who's facilitating said endeavor. Not only is this something Twilight would do, as shown in this episode, with her continually geeking out over having students of her own and being able to share her love of learning, but it's another good use of her ascension to the Princess of Friendship, taking on a mentoring role and guiding the next generation, as Celestia presumably did for her. And while we're on the subject, Princess Twilight is a big deal! Who knew? I really liked how they handled Twilight as a princess here. Obviously, the town respects and understands her position, and the kids are of course more blunt in their admiration. But Twi, being Twi, is completely numb to her new position, remaining humble, but is still shown to be understanding concerning the friendship problems the CMC encountered during this episode. The trio is afraid that all the attention Twilight is getting as a result of their bragging is what she's going to get mad at them for, but it ends up being the fact that they were using their relationship with her to gain leverage from the rest of the students that really sets her off. However, not only does Twilight handle the situation with the CMC really well, but just as Diamond and Silver are about to lay into the girls, Twilight just shuts down every pony else in the room, preemptively calling them all on their hypocrisy. Another great aspect of this episode is that we get our second bout of additional characterization for Diamond, Tiara, and Silverspoon this season, which is great. I love how we're finally starting to flesh out the pair and giving them a bit more of a presence in the series, doing things besides just insulting the Crusaders. Diamond is so focused on image and status, your typical stuck-up bully, and Spoon is the lackey, doing her best to keep up with Tiara and make sure that she's included in whatever Tiara gets into. Their relationship seems to be based on something other than legitimate friendship, since there isn't much of a connection between the two, at least shown in this episode. I couldn't help but feel kind of bad for Spoon, though. She seemed so enthusiastic towards Tiara, but the enthusiasm isn't reciprocated. Tiara cares about getting to see the princess, but doesn't care if Spoon gets left behind, leaving Spoon herself to bluntly interject in the hopes of being remembered. One has to wonder why the pair is even a pair in the first place if portrayed like this. Maybe Spoon was in a similar position to Babseeds, getting picked on by Tiara, but ended up placating to her ego to get on her good side and avoid the teasing altogether. I don't know. There really wasn't much in terms of a powerful moral on display here. Certainly not one as potent as some of the last few episodes we've had, but for such a simple episode, it did its job. Not to mention the framing device didn't really allow for a deep introspective message in the first place, nor do I think the Crusaders are really the right characters to deliver morals like this. Most of the time. We do get a healthy dose of irony here though. The CMC put Diamond Tiara on blast in the beginning of this episode for propping herself up on others' accomplishments, but then proceed to do the exact same thing themselves with Princess Twilight, garnering favor from the rest of the student body via their connection to royalty. Kind of a missed opportunity not to have this realization dawn upon the trio at the end of the episode, but the fact that it was there was still rather noteworthy. In terms of things that didn't work, there really wasn't a lot that rubbed me the wrong way with this episode. I mean, the third act was a bit wonky, with the CMC deciding that the best way to duck out of all the other kids who wanted to go to Twilight time was to make a beeline for Twilight's house, or that Pip becomes the exposition deliverer right at the end to clue in Twilight to what the CMC have been up to all week. The biggest misstep, though, was probably the episode not really taking enough time to show that the CMC were truly relishing in their newfound status, making it easy to perceive them as just getting caught up in the spectacle as opposed to actually doing anything wrong, as that's how I interpreted it on my first viewing. There were only a couple lines that really cemented the Crusaders as accepting these favors blatantly, and despite a week of time going by, we're only shown 2 short scenes when this happens: the lemonade stand opening and Tiara's pool party. Something like this might have worked more effectively with a song or a montage to better ground the Crusaders as brazenly soaking up their newfound fame, but despite this one major hang-up, the rest are comparatively minor, and none of them do that much to hamper the fun characterization on display that carried this episode from start to finish. Overall, Twilight time is a lot of fun. I've been kind of saying that a lot about season 4, so maybe it's getting a bit repetitive to hear that outside of my personal favorites for the season, but I can't help it. A lot of these episodes really are just taking these characters we love so much and throwing them into a cute 22-minute scenario with some laughs along the way. And while that may mean there isn't a whole hell of a lot to critically break down and examine, it doesn't mean that they're any less enjoyable. Now I have a question for you. What minor character would you like to see subtly expanded a bit more upon, like Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon were in this episode? Also, how would you frame their exposition? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have a question for me, I'll be doing a Q&A on this episode in the next few days, so feel free to leave me a question at the Tumblr link below in the description under the like button. Until next time, I'm Tommy Oliver. Stay curious.
Don't matter 'cause you understand. Sometimes I think that I am overwhelmed by the vastness of my realm. Reaching up, the sun splits in 5.